You're about to watch Jonathan Majors answer the question, have you ever hit a woman? So make sure to use your observation skills on this first impression.
Hit a woman?
Never hit a woman. I've never, my hands have never struck a woman, ever.
How did those injuries come about?
I wish to God I knew. That would give clarity. That would give me some type of peace about it.
By the end of this video, you will be able to tell if he was telling the truth or not. Hello and welcome back, my body language buddies. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell if you don't want to miss any of my body language analysis and tips. Let's get down to it. This is the context. Actor Jonathan Majors has been convicted of misdemeanor, reckless assault, and harassment in connection with an altercation involving his former girlfriend, Grace Jabbari, facing the possibility of up to 1 year in jail. I already analyzed the texts that were released at the start of the investigation, so I'm going to drop that link in the description of this video so you can check it out. Now, there is a clip on the interview when Majors accepts that they had a complicated relationship, and it also offers clues about his body language.
I loved Grace. Our relationship was, it was not healthy, you know, and that began to reveal itself over time, but there was no abuse.
The first body language clue I noticed is right after he says, "I love Grace." You can see a subtle lip pinch or pressure on his right side. This doesn't have a meaning in itself, but it's important to keep it in mind because it's an emotional marker. We just need to keep our eyes open in case it repeats in later clips. When he says that the unhealthy part of the relationship was beginning to unravel over time, that's an indirect way of saying that he was unaware of that for some time. At that point, he does a head gesture of tilting towards the interviewer and raising his eyebrows. He's looking for sympathy, as in, I was not aware that she was like that. And then there's his brows up and together with an expression of denial, stating that there was no abuse. Keep in mind those words, just in case he contradicts himself later on. The incident occurred in March 2023 when Majors and Jabbari got into a fight in a chauffeur car after Jabbari saw a text message from another woman on Majors' phone. The altercation escalated and surveillance video captured parts of the incident. He got out of the car, tried to get her back into it, then she appeared to calm down for a few seconds. But then, as they were walking together, she reached for his phone again to see the text from the woman. And that's when Majors began to run, and the street cameras recorded them running for 4 blocks. Jabbari chasing Majors. This is why some people have automatically assumed that Majors was innocent, because how can a victim be pursuing her alleged attacker for 4 blocks? Even so, the case is much more complex than that, and there's another clip of the interview that proves it.
She says inside the car, you hit her in the face,
Yeah.
twist her arm behind her back, fracture her middle finger.
Yeah, that did not happen.
So there are quite severe allegations from Jabbari that Majors got physical with her, trying not only to restrain her, but also hitting her on the face, which he denies. He's quite calm denying it, and besides a lip puck at the start and clenching his jaw a few seconds later, I see few emotional markers. He could just be uncomfortable about recalling the incident, but then he continues.
What happened?
She went to grab the phone, I held the phone, I pulled the phone back, she came on top of me, squeezed my face, slapped me. That's all I remember.
One thing that I notice here is that Majors recalls the incident as someone who is going through an event again, in the sense that his eyes and head movement are congruent with someone who's putting himself in a situation again and is reliving the incident, making all the gestures as if he's right in the middle of the action again. But what bothers me is the words, "That's all I remember," with that slight smirk on his mouth. It means that he acknowledges that there is part of what happened inside that car that he doesn't remember. And keep in mind that the driver of the car saw everything that happened, because that will be important as well. But add the fact that Major's memory of the incident, as per his own words, leaves things out just because he doesn't remember everything, and this is starting to look not good for him. Jabari was later discovered by the police lying on the floor of her apartment. Following her allegations of assault, strangulation, and harassment, Majors was arrested by the New York City Police. He was convicted on December 2023, but acquitted of 1 count of assault and 1 count of aggravated harassment, indicating that the jury did not find sufficient evidence to support the claim of intentional assault. Now, in the first clips that you saw, he was being asked perhaps the 2 most critical questions. Have you ever hit a woman? And how can he explain Jabari's injuries? When, in fact, when he is pressed about the injuries we already mentioned, this is his answer.
This is literally a nightmare. I don't know what happened. I don't know what injuries you're talking about.
I'm going to skip the 2 previous facial expressions for a minute to focus on his words. He says, "I don't know what happened. I don't know what injuries you're talking about." Again, reinforces the fact that he is appealing to his lack of knowledge of the situation. "I don't know what happened." And previously he said, "That's all I remember." But jumping to another part of the interview, he reacts to the fact that Grace Jabari was arrested in October regarding this same incident and she was not prosecuted. All of a sudden, he affirms that he knows what happened.
That's hurtful. That's really hurtful. And why is it hurtful? Because, again, I know what happened.
You start to notice that Jonathan Majors' interview looks really suspicious because of the inconsistencies of his statements. At some point, he claims that he doesn't remember all the details or that he doesn't know how her injuries happened. But when he is asked about Jabari being arrested but not prosecuted, he finds that fact hurtful because he knows what happened. These are the moments that I can understand that you might be concerned that since we are talking about an actor, a person whose profession is pretending to feel emotions and pass those emotions as real, then what stops him from using those skills? So that's why we need to compare his own words in different parts of the interview to spot those contradictions. Now, from the trial, there are 2 clues to keep in mind because they too will be important later on. The first one is that Majors did not take the witness stand when defending himself. At the same time, he claims that he did not intentionally injure Jabari. The jury found him guilty of reckless assault but acquitted him of 1 count of assault and 1 count of aggravated harassment, suggesting that while he didn't intend to harm her, his recklessness resulted in her injuries. But let's watch that. How did those injuries happen again?
How did those injuries come about?
I wish to God I knew. That would give clarity. That would give me some type of peace about it.
You're starting to realize that this interview was a bad idea. He doesn't know how her injuries happened, but he knows that it wasn't him, but he doesn't remember everything what happened in the car, let alone at her apartment. If this was a police interrogation, he would already be a huge red flag. Now, watch the following clip, which happens right next after the one you just saw, and where he acknowledges that he was being reckless.
But you're confident you didn't
I have
cause
no
them.
question.
Were you reckless?
I was reckless with her heart.
You not with her body.
Not with her body.
I need to point out how many times we have analyzed narcissists and toxic personalities on this channel and how they can try to manipulate your perception of what they did so they don't look as bad, or sometimes how you are the one who did wrong. And in this case, Majors is trying to make it seem that since he wasn't reckless with her body, then it was not that bad that he was reckless with her heart. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but being reckless with a woman's heart is a poetic way of saying emotional manipulation, which is a covered way of controlling people. And then there was that subtle lip pressure to one side, an emotional marker that repeats. Maybe it's nervousness in those specific moments. Now, this is the best time to remember when he was talking about their unhealthy relationship. What were his words? There was no abuse. But now he says that he was indeed reckless with her heart. Notice the contradiction again, and that's why he made sure to speak in general terms. There was no abuse. Because if he had said there was no physical abuse, then it could have triggered a question like, and what about psychological or emotional abuse? And he would be cornered into answering that direct question. I am not saying that Jonathan Majors has sociopathic traits. This is not a diagnosis, but it's important to remember that toxic personalities speak in this very way, in vague or general terms to avoid further questioning, and at the same time claim later that it was you who misinterpreted their words, that is not what they meant when they said it. I'm going to give you an additional insight about what happened. Remember that it was a text of a mystery woman that started the fight inside the car? Jabari did not see it by accident. Majors says in this interview that he did it. He showed her the text on purpose. He doesn't explain why, but my guess is to spark jealousy in her. And well, he got more than he bargained for.
I did that. I cop to it. I show her, right? It's in my hand. She grabs it. We scuffle for the phone.
Toxic personalities also know how to trigger you into overreacting so later they can use that against you. That you are unhinged, that you are not in control of your emotions, that you're the crazy one. Now, what is Major's true character? Is he someone who is in control of his own emotions? And regarding this, he acknowledges that he lost his temper.
We were in an argument. I was on the other side of the room, away from her, as I think she testified. And by my bedside table, I did a sweep, and I knocked over my candles.
I'm not going to say that this is justified or it's the best way to react, but anybody can have a sudden burst of anger. Now, sweeping a bedside table that has glass items can be a bit dangerous. But then he continues.
I completely lost my temper in that moment and threw it all on the ground. What she also said is that afterwards I wept and cried in the corner and said I was sorry and this. And I was, and I am.
Again, it doesn't look as bad as Jabari herself testified that this is what happened. And then he was crying in the corner saying, I'm sorry, and he's sorry of having done that. Now, there's something that has to be said about how someone can manipulate the perception of the public about them. Attorneys know how to train their clients into not appearing too perfect, because someone who appears too perfect raises suspicions. So I would not be surprised that this story of his rage outburst and sweeping the candles and breaking them to the floor is like a distraction. Not appear too perfect. Be seen like a human being with emotions and, of course, deflect attention from Jabari's mysterious injuries. And that is the first step to portray yourself as a victim. In Major's case, he had no qualms about making sure people thought that this was a race issue. He expressed shock and dismay at the verdict and believes that race played a role in his arrest and conviction. He argues that a white man facing similar allegations might not have faced the same consequences. And he made sure to be really clear about that.
Do you feel that race is a part of this?
Yeah, of course it is, without question.
So he's not sure about a number of things, but he seems 100% sure that this is unfair because it's tied to the color of his skin. And he continues.
That quote unquote guilty verdict, guilty verdict, no quote unquote, you might as well put that on my birth certificate.
He's doubling down, being dramatic, and saying that it's like from birth he was sentenced to go through this kind of events, that this was a given. And he also shows this pain expression at the end of those words. Maybe you want to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I will be honest, I don't know, in the United States, when a black man calls 911, all the ways it can go wrong. But there's a third clip on the topic.
If you watch those videos and you reverse that, and you saw a black man chasing a young white girl down the street, screaming and crying, that man is going to be shot and killed in the streets of New York City.
Well, he's got a point about that fact, but that doesn't mean that he's innocent, because we don't know what happened after that chase. We don't know what happened at Jabari's apartment. But there's a thing, Majors not only makes this about race, he also reveals a personal condition that, again, I'm struggling to understand how this has to do with the case, but watch it for yourself.
Ideations of removing myself from situations permanently is a thought that I've had since I was a kid.
He said that he has been diagnosed with severe depression, which is bad enough, but then they show some hard-to-stomach text where he was clear in his intention of ending his own life. And he also states it here that it's been an ongoing thought ever since he was a kid, using the euphemism, removing myself. Again, that's too bad for him, but revealing it on this interview has the opposite effect, because it absolutely looks like he wants to be the victim here. There are a couple emotional markers, though. Both the tongue show and the single shoulder shrug are signals that he is not comfortable with the topic. Not necessarily that he's lying, but he doesn't like to talk about this. Once more, I need to ponder the question. Are these emotions real, or he's trying to inspire pity? If he is not guilty of the accusations, if it was an unfair conviction, then why add these personal details that have nothing to do with Jabari? And now that we are talking about the trial, why didn't he take the stand to defend himself?
The driver.
You felt that was compelling enough. He had said enough.
Well, not just the driver, She was doing everything, he was doing nothing. Well, that's what I was going to say.
According to Majors, he did not take the stand because the driver of the car where the first struggle happened saw everything and testified that it was Jabari the one who did all the aggression. But my question is, that was just a few seconds of all the events. What about the running for 4 blocks? What about what happened at Jabari's apartment? If you are innocent and you want to clear your name and you want to set the record straight, you want to take the stand. But he continues.
Mr. Majors, did you see any injuries on her? No, I didn't. Clinical experts, the detective I spoke to, all who testified before I did. But after all of that, what was I going to add?
Well, I'm going to tell you what he could have added. He could have added his actual recollection of events, because one thing is the clinical experts who can talk about their analysis of the injuries, but the only 2 people who lived through the whole night, from the car incident to the following day when the police arrived, are Jabari and Majors. Why would Majors opt out of telling his version on the stand? And there's another angle of Majors that we haven't discussed yet. Some recordings that can also shed light onto his personality and character, and maybe a bit of a controlling tendency. There's an audio recording where he scolds Jabari for not living up to the standards of being the woman next to him. He says, and I quote, "How dare you come home drunk and disturb the peace of our house?" Coretta Scott King, do you know who that is? That's Martin Luther King's wife. Michelle Obama, Barack Obama's wife. My temper, my blah blah blah, all that said, I'm a great man. A great man. I am doing great things, not just for me, but for my culture and for the world. That is actually the position I'm in. Well, I guess those great things don't include Marvel, but anyway, the woman that supports me, that I support, needs to be a great woman. Obviously, the interviewer had to ask him, what was all that about? Why were you mentioning Coretta Scott King and Michelle Obama? And I don't know if you spotted an extremely concerning line in those words, but before I tell you which one is it, let's see his rationale behind this speech.
It was me trying to give an analogy of what it is I'm aspiring to be. You know, these great men, Martin, President Obama.
Yeah, the guy has lofty goals for sure, but then he has this tiny slip of the tongue when he continues.
I was attempting, and I did a terrible job at it apparently, I was attempting to motivate, to enlighten, to give perspective as into what it is I was hoping to get out of the relationship.
Yeah, you notice how he said, I was trying to enlighten her into what I hope to get out of the relationship. That absolutely sounds like a transaction, which in turn doesn't sound very romantic. But the thing he said in that Coretta Michelle tirade that concerns me the most was my temper, my stuff, my blah blah blah, all that said, I'm a great man. He's acknowledging that he's got a temper, that he's got some shit and blah blah blah, but none of that matters because he's a great man. And that's a huge red flag. That's something that toxic personalities do. Seems I'm a great man, then my temper, my flaws, doesn't matter. It is you who are not living up to my standards. You are the one at fault here. I wouldn't be surprised that he could even blame his temper and outburst on her, because that's what these kind of personalities do. And yes, afterwards they sit on the corner, say they are sorry, and affirm they will never do that again. Until they do. And after all that we have watched, let's go full circle and watch those two clips at the start of this video again, so you can see them with a better understanding of his body language and personality.
But never hit a woman.
Never hit a woman. My hands have never struck a woman, ever.
How did those injuries come about?
I wish to God I knew. That would give clarity. That would give me some type of peace about it.
Jonathan Majors' future in the industry remains uncertain, with his roles in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and other projects effectively cancelled. But what do you think? What did you see in Majors' body language and words? And most important, do you think he will be able to redeem himself? I would love to read your opinion in the comments. My body language buddies, don't forget to download my free 100 body language tips in the description of this video so you can learn to read people like a book. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy. And remember, much love and bliss.